Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, a returning guest. She goes by Criminal Justice Chris. And if you're watching this on my returned YouTube channels, X, Rumble, or Rockfin, you will see her Medium page. And this will be our third episode we've covered. Kind of the same subject, things around the Son of Sam case. We did our original one. We covered kind of the Son of Sam and the dark psychosphere of 1970s, which was really true, like a very dark era in New York City for a variety of economic, cultural reasons. But then we also covered the very occulted and shadowy case of Roy Radin, his life in the kind of limelight, I guess, in Broadway, and then his murder out in the desert, really kind of in north of LA, a strange place, kind of up by the five. Really, it's very well traveled, but for some reason his perpetrators took him out. That's a whole nother backstory, but you can check out those earlier episodes. We did those last year, 2025. She reached out to me because of some of the information that come out. It seems like Berkowitz is becoming this catch-all for crimes and stuff like that. Another one of these is this whole notion of the Bronx sniper. I guess it was published in I think it was the New York Post, was an article. I'll try to bring it up right now, but that supposedly ties Berkowitz to this another crime. So Criminal Justice Chris can talk more about that. So Criminal Justice Chris, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Awesome. So for people who didn't hear our last two shows, maybe you can talk about your background. I know you've done a lot of academic work and are friends with some of these people. Maybe you can talk about that, and then what led up to some of your more recent posts on your Medium page.
Yeah, I mean, I have an undergraduate in criminal justice, English, and psychology. I'm currently working on another undergraduate in journalism.
Gotcha.
And I should be wrapped up with that in about a year and a half. I'm in contact with David Berkowitz. I've been in contact with him since roughly July of 2022. And there has been a growing issue with making speculative claims regarding crimes people think profile out to something he could have done. And a lot of the speculation is, I mean, in my opinion, is unwarranted. It's a bit excessive. He's fairly upset about a lot of the accusations because it just seems like he's being targeted unfairly.
And these accusations are in the context of this. I mean, true crime is the number one genre in new podcasting, and it takes place in this kind of maybe not a lot of integrity to the truth or something like that in this. And I've covered this in the false innocence project, this whole innocence fake, and it feels like this is kind of in that vein. Would you agree with that, this kind of situation?
I would agree with you. I mean, I am all for looking at cold cases and trying to solve them. I think that's important. But whenever it becomes so speculative that there's no room for solving, I believe in this case, for example, they can't even find the police reports.
Wow.
If they can't find the police reports, if there's no existing ballistics evidence, there's no forensics, there's no witnesses, I don't really see the bottom line objective in making the accusation, let alone going to a Murdoch publication like the New York Post.
For people who aren't familiar with the 70s Bronx sniper, maybe you can just talk about the fact pattern of the case.
The Bronx sniper shootings, according to the paper, began on August 22nd. There was a man that was shot initially, and then the next night, 2 more people were shot. And then on September 1st, another person was shot. And then finally on October 18th, Margaret Iglesias was shot and killed. She was the first person that was shot and killed. There was also an allegation that there was an earlier shooting that could have been connected, Osvaldo Vargas, that would have happened in July. That is not accurate. that is even though the police reports I don't believe exist on that one. It showed that that was solved within about 24 hours of the shooting, and it was a accidental shooting that went through a window, and it was I believe the child was 3 years old, if I remember off the top of my head, but it was an accidental shooting. Are you there?
Sorry, I'm talking to you with my mic
Okay.
muted.
Okay.
The young girl was shot. It was Martine Iglesias, right? Is one.
Margaret Iglesias. She was shot on October 18th, 1970. She was with her friend Yvonne Vega. They were out at approximately 2 o'clock in the morning in the South Bronx area. She was returning from a party. The area was fairly dangerous. Of course, there's nothing wrong with being out that late. She asked permission from her father. She was 16 years old at the time. It seemed like she was a very well-adjusted girl and universally liked. Whenever she was shot, she initially said that she was shot. Her friend went to get help, and while her friend was getting help for her, she was shot 2 more times, and it was by a sniper. And it's really sad that the South Bronx was an extremely dangerous area at the time. It was around 169th and Morrisania. The area that she was shot was Morris and Grand Avenue. And all the other snipings that revolved around the Bronx sniper shootings were also within basically the same radius, the same block.
Right. And there were like 5 other shootings or something like that too, right?
Yeah, roughly, yeah. Yeah.
All women. So
they weren't all women. Some of them were men.
Okay.
The first shooting was a man, and I believe another one of the shootings on the following night was a man.
And this not is 19. All right, go ahead.
Not all the names are listed in the paper, so we don't know who all the victims were.
Gotcha. But so there were a lot of survivors, only one death. But this is 1970, not 1975, 76, right?
Yeah, it was 1970, and it was it would have been whenever David Berkowitz was in high school, pre-military.
Right, so pre-military, interesting. So this is some kind of, and it's never been solved, supposedly, right? Is that right?
No, it's never been solved. And from my understanding, there are no existing police reports. There are no ballistics. There's no existing forensics, at least that's been found so far. So to go to the New York Post and make the accusation, it seems like a bit of a jump. In addition, David Berkowitz, he was roughly 17 years old at the time. It was prior to going into the military, and he has said he had no gun experience prior to going to the military. And it seems like it would have been very difficult to pull off that kind of sniping attack at his age, based on the environmental conditions, his experience, and a lot of other variables.
Right, and it's easy to pin this on him because of the kind of different crimes that he himself confessed to, right? Because he was kind of like a multi, he was blamed for these, the Son of Sam killings, but he was also supposedly an active like fire starter and property destroyer, right?
Yeah, I mean, he had engaged in deviant behavior from the time he was a kid. And I believe he was lighting fires from the time he was roughly maybe in elementary school. So I mean, I can understand the allure at thinking, okay, well, maybe he could have possibly done something like this and started earlier, because that's seems like it's fairly typical for people in his behavioral profile, as they do start when they're younger. But it doesn't seem like he would have had the training to pull something like this off, let alone at 2 o'clock in the morning in a dangerous area. He lived at Dreiser Loop at the time, which was approximately 9.6 miles away. So So they're basically expecting how would he have gotten there to pull those shootings off? He didn't have a driver's license. He got around mostly on a bicycle. If you're saying that he took the subway and he walked each way, I mean, it's not logical. And then the Post makes the speculation, as well as the individuals who took it there, that he could have been using his father's hardware store that he managed, Sell More Hardware, because it was in the same general area as basically a hub or an operational point. But that doesn't, in my opinion, make much sense, because his father might have had keys to the place and he managed it, but he didn't own it. If you're hiding a gun in a business like that, you're placing the adults at risk, and you're placing it at risk for discovery, because there are other employees as well. And inventories being audited, the chance for finding the gun at the hardware store would be fairly high. Then, of course, there's the apartment that he lived in with his father and his stepmother. It was a fairly small, cramped apartment. He couldn't have hid a gun there. I don't believe that his father would have left a gun unrecognized and not questioned him.
Gotcha. Is the New York Post article still online? Because I can't seem to find it.
Yeah, hold on just a second.
Yeah, if you could put it in the show notes of the private chat, I'd like to pull it up.
Yeah, let me see.
I mean, I couldn't seem to find it. It's just like any story with David Berkowitz is gonna, or any other serial killer, I guess, is gonna be very popular. So people will just keep writing, and the speculative stuff will continue.
Yeah, I found it here. It's Bronx girl's 1970 murder could be tied to Son of Sam, retired detective and crime buff believe, and it's written by Tina Moore of the New York Post. If the viewers type in David Berkowitz and Bronx Sniper on Google and then go over to the news section, you'll see it'll be one of the first articles that pops up.
Because your article comes up. Can you copy that and put it into the private chat?
Yeah, hold on.
It's not pulling. I mean, maybe it's Brave. It's not doing it. Let me try Google. Bronx Sniper.
It's in the private chat.
Okay, great. Yep, there it is.
So yeah, as I was saying, he didn't have a driver's license. He relied on bicycle transportation mostly. Living 9.6 miles away, you're looking at a bicycle ride each way of roughly about 50 minutes at 2 o'clock in the morning in a dangerous neighborhood. If you know anything historical about the South Bronx at the time, that area was highly infested by gangs, including the Savage Skulls. And there was also a Black Panther sniper nest. Drugs were rampant in the neighborhood. There were some gangs that had declared a war on drugs and were actively going after citizens that they thought were trafficking drugs in the neighborhood. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons that there could have been snipings and in that general block, including territorial control, other than thinking a 17-year-old kid with no gun experience did it. It could have been an accident. It could have been a Black Panther sniper accident. They could have mistaken her for a drug carrier. Women have been used to carry drugs. Now, I'm clearly not saying Margaret Iglesias was doing that, but if you're talking about people getting shot in the same block, it seems to scream that there's a territorial issue, especially considering drug trafficking and drug dealing was high back then.
Gotcha. So it's, and like I said, it's in this context of this, difficult situation in New York where there's a lot of crime going on. But it's just like another thing of like, okay, we're going to do some more, connections supposedly to Son of Sam. I mean, it's in the context of the Savino case, right?
Yeah, it's in the context of the Savino case, and it seems like it's a case of bootstrapping. If you're familiar with that, with what
Explain
that is,
that.
it's like, well, with bootstrapping, you take a case that has more logic to it, and then you start to strap in speculative cases following it in order to lend credibility that this person could have committed these crimes.
Gotcha.
I can understand the arguments for Wendy Savino based on her alleging that he was her shooter and that the DA's office and the NYPD did not take her seriously in 77. But David Berkowitz denies it, and the family doesn't have particularly a good track record with reliability if you look into them.
Gotcha. And this whole thing, it's kind of in this context of just like the larger kind of maybe clickbait, superficial connections to kind of, I think by some researchers to just constantly put more information out without the kind of integrity to the truth. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. And that's where that bothers me mostly because I am working on another undergraduate in journalism currently. And yeah, this does seem like clickbait. I mean, the article doesn't say that the shooting occurred at 2 a.m., which would have raised questions. Okay, is it logical that a 17-year-old kid would be in the South Bronx area at 2 o'clock in the morning? Would his parents have let him out that late for a curfew? Then there's also the fact that it's 9.6 miles away from his residence. And it was a dangerous area and that there were snipings already happening at the time. I mean, historically, it's roughly about the time that the Kent State shootings happened. Not all the snipings that are in the paper at the time were actually snipings. A lot of them were not recorded accurately, and it could have been just like ricochet or anything else. This does seem like it was indeed a sniping. All the same, there's no supporting evidence that David Berkowitz would have been responsible for the shooting. And it seems like it's not prudent, in my opinion, to speculate if you don't even have existing police reports and ballistics.
Right. It's been like 55 years. I mean, it's incredible. That's almost ancient times. A whole nother generation of things that went on. Did the police ever have a prime suspect for these crimes?
I don't believe that they had a prime suspect. They were very careful at first not to say that they believed that all the shootings were connected. And then as you read the later newspaper articles, there seems to be more of opinion that they could have been connected, but they still restrained from saying all the shootings were connected. There was also a lot of apathy in the neighborhood because there was so much violence going on at the time that people weren't even really staying off of the streets after the shootings were happening repeatedly. And there wasn't really action to start actively looking for the sniper until Margaret Iglesias was shot and killed. People in the neighborhood were very upset about it, as well they should have been,
Right. I mean, it's really just something else. And I think that's kind of like it's kind of like caveat emptor or buyer beware of people in this environment, because the innocence fraud thing is real, man. There's so many fake crimes or manipulation of evidence or creation of evidence in the new media that isn't really sued. There's no civil suits or anything like that, but it's I've done just so many stories on these guys, but it's just another one of these like I'm surprised New York Post ran some of this stuff.
Well, I think it's one of the reasons why journalism is losing credibility as well. And you have a lot of journalism that is shifting to podcasting and blogging and other type of decentralized forms. And it's true crime. It permeates a large portion of the market. And speculation seems to be very prevalent right now, and it's increased because of COVID-19, because people had a lot of time on their hands to watch. So, I mean, there's a market for it. All the same, whenever it gets this speculative and it goes to the New York Post, you have to wonder what exactly the agenda was for it.
Right.
And it's not the first time that the Post has ran these kind of articles that were not necessarily correct. There was also one of David Berkowitz's friends who was accused of accosting Wendy Savino at the Clarkstown Library in July of 2025, and it didn't happen that way. And an FOIA release has been done, and it shows it didn't happen that way. And the friend has been actively trying to get the videotape to demonstrate that it did not happen that way. And the police have cited privacy issues that they will not release the tape. But I I I personally don't agree with that. They should release the tape. If you have somebody's reputation on the line and an accusation is made that he grabbed this person and it didn't happen, in a police report, then it needs to be adequately addressed.
Right. And there's just a lot of articles and coverage at the time, right? Like through all the newspapers in New York City.
Well, I mean, the first Savino, when Savino first broke in 2024, June, there was more coverage. When the library incident happened, that was a year and a half. That was about a year later, and the coverage had died down, but all the same, the Post did not do a good job covering that either. They clearly knew. Allegedly, she had told either the editor or the writer that his friend had grabbed her, and they contacted the police. Allegedly, they were told that they had viewed the tape and it did not go down that way. But the Post went ahead and ran the article and failed to mention that they had actually talked to the police and there was no video coverage showing that he grabbed her. Now, did the New York Post say that he grabbed her in the article? No, they did not, but they should have taken the allegations less seriously based on getting contradictory information.
Gotcha.
They basically just said he accosted her at the library.
Gotcha. Is Berkowitz, do you know if he's familiar with these new allegations?
Yes, he's familiar with the new allegations.
What's his?
He is not happy about it. He thinks they're absurd. He categorically denies shooting Margaret Iglesias. I have no reason to believe he did it. I believe if he did it, he would admit to it.
Right. He's what, 70? How old is he? 75 now?
72. I mean,
72.
After a while, it would have to be tiresome to constantly be made a spectacle of and have accusations thrown at you just because of the publicity level.
Right. I mean, it's like I said, it's just these are stories that he's never going to get away from because of his infamy. It's just like, okay, we'll place it on him. I think they've done that in others, if you call Berkowitz a serial killer, but in other like multiple victim crimes, they've, I think some cases have been placed on people that really weren't their case. They just said, okay, maybe this is one too. Mm-hmm. This is one too. I mean, much like Son of Sam, I don't think Berkowitz committed all those crimes. Do you?
No, I do not think he committed all the crimes.
Right.
I mean, he obviously recently reverted and said that he acted alone, but I think that there were a lot of other circumstances that would have triggered that kind of reaction, including just not wanting to talk about the crimes anymore and wanting to be left alone.
Right.
And frankly, there were documents that were released to too many people, Maury Terry's investigative files, that were under a violated non-disclosure agreement. And being in maximum security, whenever those kind of documents get out, but there's no incentive to continue to cooperate, and it puts the person at risk.
Right. Yeah, it's really something else. I mean, like you said, it's like this has to be seen in the so people have to really be careful about some of these stories and put them in context.
Mm-hmm.
For me, this is a big stretch that he was involved in crime before going into the military. I'm fairly familiar with the Son of Sam Berkowitz talked to a bunch of people who know Berkowitz, and it's pretty questionable. What else are you working on? Do you have anything else you'd like to add about the Bronx sniper case?
There's some other information that was thrown in there that it seems questionable, including the 100 bore the targets. There were targets found on vouchers, and those were they tried to link those to the crimes. Target papers inert. It was probably destroyed years ago. There was also the argument that he owned an AR-7 rifle, which was a 22, and she was shot with a .22. So there was the overlap that, okay, well, he's used .22 before, so trying to do it retroactively and applying that to her case. Well, the AR-7, that was a box. It didn't show, he didn't actually own that. He has said that he didn't own this gun. It's specifically shown as a box on the voucher. Did he own another .22? Yes, but you can't just retroactively say that applies to him, and that gun's experience translates to whenever he was 17 years old. And arguably also whenever Margaret Iglesias was shot, he was in school full time. He was volunteering for the auxiliary. He had a fairly big schedule on his plate. Does it completely eliminate him from possibly doing this? I don't think it's responsible to say absolutely from a scientific standpoint, but I would say 99.9% sure he didn't do this.
Is there, when's the first evidence that he ever committed a crime?
The first evidence that he actually committed a crime would have been Michelle Foreman.
What year was that?
1975. There have been arguments that Wendy Savino was the first victim. That is not accurate. First of all, he denies it. Second of all, Michelle Foreman was a stabbing victim over Christmas of 1975, and he admitted to that one. Gotcha. So yeah, Wendy Savino was not the first.
What year was Savino? It was 75 or 76, right?
Savino was April 9th, 1976.
76, right. Wow. What else are you working on? Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I received a release on his military records last year. I have been working on his military records, including there is a strange signature in his enlistment paperwork. If you look at the enlistment paperwork, and there's a blog that I have on it, and I had a forensic handwriting analyst look at it, where the enlistment signature should be witnessed, and he can't do that himself. It has to be witnessed by a government employee. I verified this. It's signed Rosemary Baby. And it's odd. I got the release through NARA, which is the National Archives, just to make sure that the signature was still matching. I sent in a request to the Bronx District Attorney's Office pre-subpoena to make sure that the signature was still matching. They sent me documents, and the signature was still there. So there's no reason to think that the signature was manipulated somewhere between 77 to now. Could it have been manipulated sometime between his service whenever he first enlisted, 71, and 1977? I suppose it's possible, but that's a huge problem with military records, and we need to get down to why that signature is in his records. And it seems to match another signature that's in documents that we're currently working on, but we don't know who the person is.
Interesting. What do you think you'll find in the military documents? Do you think there's something important there?
I personally think that he was an MK Ultra victim.
Why do you think that?
Just because of his behavior. for one, and some other unpublished information. He had also told me whenever I questioned him about LSD, because he was using LSD whenever he first got into the military, and it's well documented that the military was using LSD for experiments for MK Ultra and other projects. But he told me that the first, I believe it would have been whenever he was in basic training or just out of basic training, that the person that gave him LSD for the first time, as well as several other people that he was enlisted with, was an officer. And for an officer to give LSD to someone on base, that's a huge risk. I mean, you can get court-martialed for that. Fort Dix was doing LSD experiments at the time. He has told me that they were signing waivers constantly, so he can't be for certain what they were doing. He of course wouldn't have had knowledge if they were doing any type of experiments. Some people, whenever they were in projects like MK Ultra, voluntarily signed up for it, but not everybody did. Am I ever going to be able to prove that, and will others be able to prove it? Probably not. But by viewing his military records and looking for anomalies, you can say whether something looks suspect or not.
What branch of the military was he in?
He was in the Army.
He was in the Army. Do you know do you remember what years they were offhand?
He enlisted in the Army in June of 1971. He started doing his paperwork in April of 1971, and he got out in June of 1974. And then I believe he was, I would have to go back through and review his military records, but I believe he was transferred to almost like a reserve status until maybe 77.
Gotcha.
Where he could be recalled.
Right. So 17, he went in 71 and out in 74
Mm-hmm.
at Fort Knox and in South Korea.
Yeah, he was. So first of all, he was at Fort Dix, and then he went through advanced training at Fort Polk. Then he went to Korea, and then he went to Fort Knox. And then he went back to New York afterwards whenever he was discharged.
Right. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean, a lot of those military guys were experimented on, and that stuff was still kind of ongoing. I think tapering off in 70s, but who knows? It depends how much LSD. Did he feel like he got a higher dose or like an extreme dose of LSD? Do you know?
I don't know. That's not something that I've asked. I know that he was doing LSD and other drugs.
Yeah, he was doing it. But so you said somebody gave it to him as well, though, right?
Yeah, an officer gave it to him. He put that in writing to me. He and several other people that he was enlisted with. And it would have been during basic training or just like after basic training, like advanced training.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty odd. That's unusual.
I would agree.
When he was committing the crimes, do you know if he was a heavy drug user?
I believe that he was occasionally using marijuana and LSD. I don't think he was a heavy drug user. He told me that he wasn't much of a drinker.
Gotcha.
So we can rule that out. But yeah, he was using drugs. I don't think it was heavily.
Does he have amnesia or anything like that? Things that he doesn't remember certain things?
I know that during certain periods, whenever he went through a lot of stress, whenever he first was incarcerated and went into Attica, yes, he's in King's Hospital. Yes, he has problems. Prior to that, during the crimes, I think that there are some time periods where he doesn't have the best memory, and I think that's hard to gauge why at this point because he is in his 70s.
Right. I mean, he's 72. Just sometimes these guys who are like people have either given them heavy drugs or something, they don't remember certain stuff. Like, oh, I don't remember those 3 months I was there. So it's, I think, an important question. We're at the 35-minute mark. Is there anything else you'd like to add or anything?
There's absolutely nothing else that I can think of at this point.
Right. It's just like, I mean, the wrap up is like, some of these stories are too much. They're out there in the media. They're out in the New York Post, right? This whole Bronx Snyder.
Yeah,
you.
there has to be some type of accountability with media. You can't just float stuff like that without giving a full story. And I understand that within the media ecosystem that there's pressure to get things published and to drive income and get more clicks. All the same, there needs to be some type of responsibility, especially whenever there are victims involved, because you don't want to just rip open wounds for victims' families whenever something is likely not going to be solvable. And I don't believe that you should be making accusations whenever it's so speculative that you can't prove it.
Right.
It affects a lot of people's lives.
Right. Where can people find your writing, Chris?
On Medium, and it's under Criminal Justice Chris.
So you can I'll put a link to that. Criminal Justice Chris on, let me see. It's at Criminal Justice Chris, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got a lot of recent articles, things like that. So people check it out. And today we just talked about the son of Sam as the so-called Bronx sniper. There's a lot of questions there. More questions than answers. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, stay there.